You really have no idea what's going to happen. Even doing your scene, you really don't know how that's going to fit into everything. I think that's what just makes it kind of exciting too, is just not knowing where he was going to go with it all.
Speaking from her home in Everett, Washington, Mary Reber recounted the experience of working with director David Lynch that began with a note on the door in 2014. Reber is the owner of the Palmer House, famously known to television fans around the world as the home of Laura Palmer, a location prominently featured in Lynch's 1992 film Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me, and revisited in the 2017 limited series known as The Return.
Sarah and Hawk did their scenes on Wednesday, and then it was time to do the finale scene. It was really cool though, because there was about 250 people out there on the corner. And then Cooper went out and talked to them about, the Seahawks, and talked about coffee, and it was really neat.
Laura Palmer's house. It's amazing.
It's our house, you're invited.
Thank you. Well, great, thank you.
Cooper and Laura practiced their part going up and down the stairs. And it took 2 takes for us at the door. Everything just flowed.
Images of the notorious night of filming in 2015 leaked almost a year and a half before the new series premiere. Unbeknownst to Reber, the majority of the crew and onlookers at the time,
cut it.
They were witness to what would become one of the most perplexing, dark, and mysterious endings in television history.
We moved into this house 2014. We were on a little trip and came back. At the front porch, there was a little note at the door from the location guy saying that they wanted to film something at the house here. So we got a hold of him and he came over, I think it was that night. He wasn't able to say what the movie was, but we assumed because it was the Palmer House that it was going to be Twin Peaks.
The 1990 pilot featured inside shots of the Everett house, which later turned into a central location for the Fire Walk With Me film. And it soon became clear that series creators David Lynch and Mark Frost were bringing it back home again for the Showtime limited series.
And then he said a director from Hollywood was going to be coming probably around January 1st or so. That day, we looked out and sure enough, there was David Lynch. And I think what David was doing mostly was going around to all the different locations and just kind of scouting out, making sure things were going to work and things looked the same and people were willing to let people into their homes or places of business.
From the time set decorators arrived in September to prep the house, to when they came back right after shooting to restore it, Reber said the Palmer home transformation was truly a sight to behold, from the decrepit dressing of the front lawn to the moody haze of the living room.
2 weeks before filming, the painters came. Amazing to watch the process. We cleaned out the room, they laid down cardboard on the floor, proceeded to put gold carpet and stained the carpet, and they painted the walls pink, put up these wonderful curtains that I kept that are nicotine stained. Nicotine stained the room. 2 days later, they painted the room back, emptied the room out, and voila.
Reber explained she was allowed to stay at her home while filming took place and was floored by the level of professionalism and pleasantness on display by the masterful crew, including executive producer Sabrina Sutherland.
Sabrina Sutherland was wonderful to work with. I really respected her as a person and as an executive producer. She's got a pretty heavy-duty job and she did it in such a wonderful way. She's very professional. She's the one who's got to keep everybody doing their thing and doing it right. I don't know, she's just a wonderful person. Really like Sabrina a lot.
She was also surprised by what can best be described as the proverbial magic of Hollywood.
And it's amazing. In the kitchen, you'll have the sound guy. You'll have Peter Deming sitting there by the door as the cinematographer. You'll have David Lynch sitting here and Corey doing her part, making sure that everybody's lines are correct.
Reber said when Twin Peaks viewers see Kyle MacLachlan as Agent Cooper and Cheryl Lee as Carrie Page ascending the staircase to the Palmer house, it's hard to imagine all of the hustle and bustle going on inside.
To me, it was the coolest experience ever to watch professionals do their job. When they were filming the scenes here, there was literally anywhere from 20 to 40 people in the house. But they have such a way to just run through the whole thing in such a professional fashion that you would never know that there was all this going on in the house, let alone 200, 250 people outside. I knew Twin Peaks aired in 89, 90, and I was raising little kids at the time. Didn't have a chance to watch it then. My son told me that I should really watch it. It was really a good show. So probably 7, 8 years ago is when I first started watching Twin Peaks. Loved it, of course. Then my husband and I wanted to buy a house. So we found one that we liked up here, and it didn't work out for us. So there was an open house here at the Palmer house. I looked at it and I thought, okay, well, it'd be an awesome house. And then my brother-in-law said, oh, that's the Palmer house. And I had really no idea. I just didn't remember that. So we came in and looked at the house and then figured this would just be a really great place to live. But we didn't buy it because it was the Palmer house. We just thought it was a really cool place.
Though Reber's introduction to Twin Peaks was relatively recent, the history of the 708 33rd Street house with the series started more than 25 years earlier. In the pilot of the original series, interior shots of the home were used for the Palmer house, featuring Grace Zabriskie as Sarah Palmer, who is seen searching for Laura from the base of the staircase and receiving the devastating news on the downstairs phone in the kitchen.
We tried to keep as much here as we could. It is my home, but I like the Twin Peaks element of this home too. There was some really, really neat things like the island in the kitchen. I think the house basically looks pretty much the same. Hasn't changed much. I think that's what the fans like. I think they like the fact that they can walk into a location that's been used for such a great series and it still looks basically the same.
With the exception of some interior scenes in the pilot, the Everett house never appeared in the original television series. Fans of early Twin Peaks recognize a different location in Monroe, Washington, as the home of the Palmers. Exterior shots of the Monroe house were used, while interiors were filmed throughout the show on an ever-changing series of California sets. The Everett house, however, appeared front and center in Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me, which included powerhouse performances by Cheryl Lee as Laura Palmer and Ray Wise as her father Leland. Laura's bedroom was a constructed set during the film's production, distinguished from the actual bedroom primarily by an alcove designed for the dresser used to hide her diary. Fire Walk With Me and the following missing pieces showcased the interior and premiered its iconic exterior, forever cementing the Everett home as the definitive Palmer house in the world of Twin Peaks. The historic neighborhood in Everett, Washington, known as Rucker Hill, began to flourish after construction of its namesake mansion at the turn of the 20th century. According to local records, a 2-story Dutch colonial revival home was built on 33rd Street at the base of Laurel Drive in 1925 by Fred Schock. Schock was a baseball player turned district manager of a successful insurance company. He died just 3 years later in 1928. The 1930 census report shows his surviving wife Catherine and children moved on from the home and were immediately followed by the Anderson household. Ossian Anderson's World War II draft card explains that he was a Swedish immigrant who became president of the Puget Sound Pulp and Timber Company in nearby Bellingham, Washington. Anderson died 12 years later, reportedly in Vancouver, and his wife Mabel is listed as residing at the 708 home until 1966. Another family moved in the following year and made it their own for nearly 5 decades. Peter and Marilyn Pedersen raised 5 children in the famous house. Peter made a living as an automobile dealer in downtown Everett and died in 2001. Marilyn, in addition to being crowned Miss Everett in her youth, was a nurse at General Hospital and eventually a nurse practitioner at the Everett Clinic.
I have great affection for it, and they'll probably have to carry me out of it. Feet first.
The Pedersons were the owners when Lynch and Frost's team first scouted the Rucker Hill neighborhood in February 1989 for the TV pilot. A month later, local paper The Everett Herald reported cameras in the area, mainly at 3316 Grand Avenue, a location used as the residence of Laura's best friend, Donna Hayward. Actor Warren Frost was up front with the Herald about the small amount of screen time the home would receive in the upcoming ABC movie, then titled Northwest Passage. Lynch, of course, returned to Grand Avenue and 33rd Street to film Fire Walk With Me 2.5 years later in September of 1991. The Herald again reported on the commotion, complete with stories of grumpy neighbors who felt inconvenienced and tension brewing between bystanders and the crew. Subsequent reporting included an announcement of Twin Peaks Productions offering the community a $1,000 check as a thank you that city officials said would go toward equipment slated for Rucker Hill Park. Years after the film's release, Marilyn Pedersen told local media that she was paid handsomely for the fan and Laura's bed that were taken and used on the constructed sets of Fire Walk With Me. She passed away in 2014, shortly after selling her beloved family home.
I love the history that this house contains. I love the fact that it was the house that the Palmer family lived in. Fire Walk With Me was just crazy cool. But like the lady who was here when Twin Peaks first filmed, somebody said, is it kind of creepy living in that house, or kind of what does it feel like to live in that house? And I'd have to agree with her. I love the history, but I can separate the fact that this is my home. And like, she would have people knocking at the door wanting to see the fan. Yeah, I love the fan, but this place is just my home.
However, David Lynch wasn't finished with the Everett location, and Reber was stunned as she soon discovered that not only the Palmer house, but Reber herself would have an active role in Twin Peaks: The Return almost 25 years later.
You get your script. You only know what your scene is going to be. You don't know what's going to happen before or after. I mean, I didn't even know, I knew Cooper was going to be here, but I didn't know who Carrie Page was going to be until that particular day.
The allegedly 500-plus page script for Twin Peaks: The Return was notoriously kept under wraps, save for a handful of people at the top of production, with the actors only receiving their piece to the giant puzzle. Series co-creator Mark Frost has said even though the story is more or less set, Lynch is one of the industry's few singular voices who always leaves a door open for a moment's revelation. One of these on-the-spot inspirations while creating Twin Peaks dates back to the pilot while shooting inside the Palmer house in 1989, when set decorator Frank Silva was working in what would be Laura's bedroom.
Frank was moving furniture around, and somebody said, "Frank, don't lock yourself in that room," because he had just moved a chest of drawers in front of the door. The image of Frank locked in that room popped into my head, and I rushed to Frank and I said, "Frank, are you an actor? You're going to be in this movie."
"25 years later, it happened again.
Knock on the door, Cal.
So they came January 1st with just a couple people, David and Sabrina. Then they came a couple months later, maybe March or April. They did what they needed to do. They were kind of scouting it out and trying to, with David Lynch, you never really know what he's doing. People were kind of milling around the house, and I was in the kitchen. And David Lynch came into the kitchen, came up to me and said, "Are you an actress?" And I said, "No." And "Have you ever acted?" "No." "Would you like to do a small part in the film?" And I said, "Sure." Reluctantly a little bit, just because I've never done it before. But then again, what a wonderful experience that could be too. He just said it wasn't for sure, but if it did happen, he was going to send a script and he would just keep in touch. Yes.
Reber said that she was hesitant at first, but eventually embraced the opportunity of portraying who she would soon find out would be Alice Tremond.
Who?
Another Tremond, and yet another resident of the Palmer house.
And then again, they came in probably July, and David Lynch came up the stairs and he said, "Well, are you ready to act?" And I thought, okay, sure. Well, now this is going to happen. I got my script shortly thereafter, and then they came October 7th for one of the nights of filming, and then October 9th.
Thanks, Mary.
Okay. But altogether, they were here for about 2 weeks.
What is your name?
Alice Tremond. He goes, "You're in your own home, you just be natural." See, what he sees you doing, he wants you to just be that person going around talking to all the people. And I think that's what he wanted at the front door is, oh, just talk to Cooper, you know? Though Cooper was like a little intimidating, you know?
I'm Special Agent Dale Cooper.
Pulls out his...
Good, Mary. Got it?
But perhaps the most shocking moment for Reber was an all too familiar saying that materialized in her script.
One of my famous lines all the time, you can ask my family, is, "Oh, that's okay." And that was one of the lines incorporated into my script. So I'm just wondering if David Lynch picked up on the, "Oh, that's okay. That's okay." All of a sudden, one of my lines was, I'm reading the script and it said, "Oh, that's okay." And I go, that's what I always say.
Good night.
Good night.
1, 2, 3, 4, lights out.
I absolutely love the fans. There's been people from all over the world, people from the area that have never been inside the house. The Twin Peaks fan art is crazy amazing. There's some really super talented people. They bring gifts, they bring their version of Evolution of the Arm, paintings of the house, or candles and all sorts of things. And it's just amazing to have the fans come in here. Some of them will come dressed up, some of them will cosplay, some of them will go outside underneath the bush that Laura hid underneath and do that scene, or go into the bathroom and wash their hands. The fans are just wonderful. I really get a kick out of it.
As the Palmer home continues to attract a global array of Twin Peaks fans and movie buffs, Reber said she's humbled to be a part of its lasting legacy and enjoys sharing her home to series devotees.
People ask me, aren't you tired of having people coming to your door? And it's like, no, it just means so much to these people. I love people for the most part, and it's just been a really good experience. How often do you get to meet people from all over the world?
And although she's open to receiving visitors as often as possible, Reber has a preferred method for accepting people into the Palmer house.
So what I do is anymore I make sure that people message me either on Facebook or Messenger or Instagram and let me know that they're interested in coming. And the main reason for that is kind of gives me a chance to know who they are first and make sure I'm here, because it's not a 15-minute trip from North Bend or Snoqualmie. I just want to make sure I'm here to greet them and spend some time with them, and that way we're conscious of each other's boundaries.
She added that it's incredible to see the emotional impact this shooting location has on the enthusiastic travelers, something Reber often witnesses as soon as they cross the threshold.
I know what this house means to a lot of people. People walk in and start crying sometimes because it meant so much to them, whether they've been through the experience that Laura had been through or just the fact that they had seen it 25, 30 years before. I just love meeting the people that I have here and kind of going through their experiences with them. It really meant a lot to a lot of people.
Mary and Tim are a wrap.
Since moving in, Reber said her love for the series has only grown, from owning a part of film history, to meeting fans, to being involved with the actual production, and through the inspiration of the art itself.
I think it's one show that I've noticed through the years that people are still talking about. It's the epitome of intellectual TV. It's not mindless TV where everything's wrapped in a tidy little package and you know from start to finish what's going to happen, or even think you might be able to try to figure out what's going to happen, because it's in the mind of David Lynch. It's his story, but I think it leaves room for everybody to come up with their own theory. And you all have something in common, and it doesn't make any difference what you believe, how you've been brought up. It's that common thread that draws all of us together and brings out the arty in people and wonderful theories that they have, being able to talk to them on that deep level.
Almost everyone that comes to the door has their own idea of what Twin Peaks is all about. Reber said that's what makes Lynch's work so special.
It's just amazing how everybody has a theory. I don't think anybody is wrong, and I think with David Lynch there is no wrong theory, because he wants you to watch, and whatever you take away from it is, that's what he wants. That's his gift.